So inner exploration is quite the right approach with what I'm about to not only present, but propose or share or explore with you this evening regarding the third object of the Theosophical Society. You know, the wordings of these third objects, not third object, but the three objects in general have changed throughout the history of the Theosophical movement. They have been rephrased and adjusted according to the needs of the moment. But the essence has never changed. So they continue to carry the same mission as the founding from the very beginning. So those who are more interested in knowing the history of three objects and how they evolved and transformed up to what we have today, they're phrased beautifully that appeal to even the youth of today. There is a very special little booklet in the library that is called the original program of the Theosophical Society. These were addresses given by H.P. Blavatsky, the founding of the Theosophical movement. And it is quite a delight to read because it really connects you with, you know, where this whole thing started and it continues to be. And so many of our members associated with the Theosophical movement and Theosophists themselves have written and explored the three objects together, their relationship, their similarities, and their uniquenesses, you know, how we can approach only one without having to get into the other two. So there are a number of things written on each one of them. But as I was researching for this lecture, the one that appealed the most to me was an article written by Joy Mills in the volume 58 of the American Theosophist Journal that we know today to be the Quest magazine in October 1970. And she writes very succinctly there on this particular object. And I suggest you read the whole publication because it's rather enlightening. And I am just citing a few quotes from that article today. Is not totally relevant to what I am going to be talking about, but I really encourage you to read her words that are profoundly inspiring. I am not going to be talking solely on the object. We are going to detour into what it means, the soul awakening. But I highly recommend you as members and people interested in the Theosophical Society to do so whenever you have the time. They are in the library. So many of our members associate the third object, you know, to investigate the unexplained laws of nature and the power latent in the human being, primarily with the awakening of the psychic powers, such as clairvoyance, clairaudience, telepathy, hypnotism, you know, all sorts of psychic abilities that are, you know, a fact. And that is a part of the scope, you know. It really embraces a range of paranormal phenomena that we can really explore and find interest in them. But it actually leads us into something profoundly insightful and much deeper than just that. So as I said, many people have written about it, and what I am about to share is just my humble understanding of it and out of my own personal practice, what I have come to practice and live in my daily life. So as we see, the third object has two parts. It says to investigate unexplained laws of nature and the powers latent in man. So Joy Mills, in her article, she proposes that the third object specifically has to do with both a way of knowing or a body of knowledge which may be called theosophy, and a way of living which may be designated as theosophical. We can take the third object in its two aspects, referring first to nature and second to man. And see that there is a close relationship between man and nature. These are two aspects of the same principle, perhaps. So she directs our attention specifically to the word and, which is the key in understanding this object. For it clues us directly to the law of correspondence, or as it is called also, the law of analogy. HPB has said that analogy is the guiding law of nature, the true thread that can lead us through the inextricable paths of her domain toward her primal and final mysteries. So what are these so-called unexplained laws of nature? You can say that they are principles and processes, immutable and universal, that invariably are functioning in the inner working and fabric of the universe as it manifests and dissolves, for one thing. And all of them operate from within outwards. So many of them are not as obvious. Some of them are more hidden or occult. So we have, for instance, the law of evolution, or the law of becoming, the emanation and dissolution of the universe, the law of life, the law of polarity, the law of periodicity, of cyclicity, or law of necessity, known also as the laws of dharma, karma, and reincarnation. Those words are probably more familiar to you, among many other principles that we have. So it is important perhaps to pay attention to also the word unexplained, because it encourages us to investigate beyond our concrete minds that would like to find an explanation for everything in the material world. The laws of nature that Theosophy is concerned with are thus inherent in the universal process of manifestation. Following the law of analogy, or correspondence as it is also has been called, we may say that whatever is found in the laws of nature must be revealed through the human being in our way of living, which constantly expresses those capacities latent within us. In other words, a revelation of our soul life, our intentions, thinking, and feelings becoming visible through our actions. So let us take a look at the law of evolution, for instance. Perhaps is the most easy to talk about because we can trace it in the physical world. There is a chronological history of evolution that we can certainly not deny. It is there. But when it comes to the process of the soul and of the spirit, it becomes rather obscure and intangible. So in order to talk about the awakening of the soul, which is the central subject of this evening exploration, we need to have some basic understanding of its origin, which is the monad. The Theosophical teachings expansively deal with this subject of the monad. So monad, many of you have heard the word, I am sure. It derives from the Greek monas, which means singularity. And in the cosmogony of the Pythagoreans, it was referred as the supreme being, Trinity, or the totality of all things. So I don't know how many of you have seen the symbol in many theosophical books of the disc or the circle with the dot in the middle. So that was For the Pythagoreans or later Greek philosophers, the first metaphysical being represented, in more or less abstract form. And it has been given many other meanings, but that is really its primordial significance. So many names have been given to to this monad, or what we call it in Theosophy, that indivisible absolute reality. Each one of these names are describing a monadic attribute. We have the divine spark, the immortal germ, breath of the great breath, the innermost self, the dweller in the body, the undivided Trinity, divinity in man. The monad from the occult perspective is that center or point of consciousness within the universal reality. Some people attribute it to the symbol of the absolute, but I wouldn't go that far as to say that that is the absolute, because that in itself is already manifested, probably in its more abstract form, but we cannot even fathom what the absolute would look like. That is beyond our comprehension. So let us leave it open, be humble and reverent to that great mystery. So it is said that there are monads everywhere, as there are atoms and subatoms in the cosmos. Sometimes they are called permanent atoms because they are there unchanging. They live within ourselves, and that is that spark that goes from one incarnation into the other. And that has the potential and accumulation of all our human experiences, that very small thing. So the monad subdivides itself by the maya of manifestation and expresses itself in its most individualized physical form. You would not believe this, but this is what I have learned, only in the human stage. The human monad, as I just said, is the only individualized, self-conscious, I would say, manifestation or embodiment of this universal principle throughout all the kingdoms of nature. The difference between these monads is mayavic. You have heard that word before, which means illusory. So for the time being appear separate, but in essence they continue to be one and the same. The human monad's divine essence is the same and unchanging as all the other monads in the universe. These are pretty lofty words. These are high concepts that Theosophy shares and proposes for us to consider, for our concrete mind to release itself from the fetters of the known world and use our imagination to reach out further into abstract realities of possibilities, realities of perhaps, as opposed to this is the way it is. What if? I wonder. So in a very precious little book that we have in the library called Light on the Path, and perhaps in the library of every student of Theosophy and other people who study the esoteric philosophy, there are 3 absolute truths shared by the Master. And the first of those truths is very precious and says that the soul of man is immortal and its future is a future of a thing whose growth and splendor has no limits. So that's something really to ponder. and to reflect upon the grandeur of this thing called soul. So let us explore a little bit more what this soul is all about, because we talked about the monad. So what is the really relationship of this soul and monad? So the soul is a reflection of the monad in the human being. So if we call it the monad to be our undivided trinity, the upper triad, as in Theosophy we call it, perhaps it will be helpful if we remember the sevenfold subdivision of the human being. You know, we have the physical body, we have the etheric, we have the astral, we have the mental, we have the causal body, the Buddhic plane, and we have the Atma. So this soul realm is in between the causal body and the astral, maybe overlapping a little bit on the etheric realm. And so, you know, it is rather abstract to us to hear about this, but when we close our eyes, we spend most of our day in our soul realm, really. It is a world very familiar to us. Very familiar. So in the words of Blavatsky from The Secret Doctrine, she constantly is reminding us of this identity of all souls with the universal oversoul. So besides all our individual souls, that is the soul of the world and of the universe, and those things are intricately connected and one. So she says that all souls are interconnected with this universal oversoul, and the latter being itself an aspect of the unknown root, the obligatory pilgrimage for every soul, a spark of the former through the cycle of incarnation, in accordance with cyclic and karmic law, and during the whole term. So this happens from cycles of manifestation to cycles of manifestation. It is still very abstract and very dense, but I promise you that this is going to get pretty transparent in just a moment. She continues by saying, the pivotal doctrine of the esoteric philosophy admits no privileges or special gifts in men, save those whom, by his own ego or soul, through personal effort and merit, throughout a long series of metempsychosis and reincarnation. Big words, and we will get there. And you may wonder, why on earth is she bringing these big words? It is holy season. We want to have fun with our family. It is time to be warm and be at home by the fireplace. But I tell you one thing, after we finish this lecture tonight, I am sure that we are going to celebrate Christmas ever since with a different mood. So bear with me. So there is a Sufi aphorism, maybe many of you have heard, and this rephrases this in a little bit more poetic way. It says, God sleeps in the rock, dreams in the plant, stirs in the animal, and awakens in man. Isn't that beautiful? But there is another one from the Kabbalistic tradition that says, the breath becomes a stone, the stone a plant, the plant an animal, the animal a man, the man a spirit, and the spirit a god. So it takes it a little bit further. So let us explore this idea of the monad in the lower kingdoms, and why is it that only in the human being it finds itself individualized? Some of you students of Theosophy have read a little bit about this, or maybe more than a little, that in the lower kingdoms, and I call them lower not because they are less, but because in the hierarchy of structural complexity of manifestation, if you will, they are the foundation stones of this whole edifice of creation. And so we have the mineral and the plants and the animal kingdoms, and it is said that these three kingdoms of nature are still mostly spiritual, and whatever is manifested is but a reflection of that spiritual life that they have. But their soul life is as a group. So the plant kingdom is being seen as a group soul, through the species, and within species they have, other different varieties of species, and likewise with animals, and likewise with the mineral kingdom. And so when they decide to take this step and that leap in evolution, they mutate from animal to human man, or to human being, they gain something that they did not have before, and that is what we call self-consciousness. Now, this is where I really have questions, because who are we to say that the plants or the rocks or the animals don't have self-consciousness as we do, or that they are not individual souls as we do? I don't know. I ask these very crazy questions to myself and say, why is it that my dog is different than my neighbor's dog, and they behave truly different? They are maybe the same species of dog, but they behave differently. And so there comes the part of Theosophy that tells us that the human kingdom is the guardian of the animal kingdom and the kingdoms below, but the kingdoms below are more in the guardianship of the spiritual world. But especially the animals, we are the protectors of those. And the more we care for them, the more we are helping them to individualize. And hence this whole idea of ahimsa, harmlessness, and caring for this animal kingdom. Because soon they will be humans. It is a law of nature to go from one kingdom into the other. And so it is really up to us how we want to relate to this animal kingdom. It is a topic in itself, but it is worth mentioning because it is really a self-responsibility for all of us to have that as a priority in our lives. So let us explore a little bit more of what we call the soul life in the human being. This is pretty much the realm of our intentions, the realm of our thoughts, our feelings, sensation, and experiences. As I said earlier, the causal body is really the repository of all human experiences, and really the seed of our intentions are there as well. Is it the intuitional body? The mental body is the thoughts, and the astral body is the realm of feelings and sensations as well. So what did Blavatsky said or refer to when she mentioned the word metempsychosis? And these are processes that happen in the human being, but they have been set in motion in the soul from the moment it was mineral, from the moment it manifested. Why is it that from the mineral it turns into a plant to gain a higher and a more sublime experience? Then all of a sudden the plant mutates and never goes back again to be a rock. It becomes an animal. And then it becomes a human being. So when it is a human being, what is it that it is for us to do? What are the tools that we have that we need to transform and work with? So it is said that this big word that comes from the Greek philosophy as well, and sometimes has been associated with reincarnation. And, it is sometimes they call it the transmigration of souls from the human being, sometimes even into animals or into other things. But the true meaning of this word is a little bit different. And that means the total transmutation of our Kama Manas consciousness into our Buddhi Manas consciousness. Big concepts, but simple as they can be. Our whole lower nature has to be transformed into our divine nature. And that is our true task as human beings. And it can only happen in human existence. The animals cannot do, because they don't have the same self-awareness as we have. Or if they do, they are striving to be human. And they get there eventually. So this process of evolution of the soul consists of this series and multiple series of transmutations of this soul into forms that are more subtler and more refined and sometimes more complex. That doesn't mean that the atom is less complex than a human being. It is very paradoxical, something that small, yet that mysterious, we so big and robust, and sometimes so weak and helpless. So, how does the soul come to such a realization, that this has to happen to me, I have to do this, to this transformation? How does this soul arrive to this state of consciousness? And is it something that it is only for the few, for those people who are only threading this so-called spiritual path? Or is it something that everyone is aspiring or indebted with? So, are you ready? Let's move on to something a little bit more inspiring. So from the Esoteric Christian tradition, many of you are familiar with the mysteries of Annunciation and Immaculate Conception, right? So Jeffrey Hudson is one of my favorite writers, theosophical writers, an insightful wise man that everyone really revered and had a friend, lovely human being. He wrote extensively on esoteric Christianity, and in one of his occasions, he mentioned a few things about these lesser mysteries. So he said, one possible interpretation of Mary, the mother of Jesus, is that is a symbolical portrayal of this interior process. The angel of Annunciation personifies the monad. The spoken words of Annunciation express the monadic power or creative word force, the atmic shaft of fire, spiritual will that gives us that awakening. The ego in a causal body is feminine and personifies the mother of saviors, including the Virgin Mary, of whom the Christ, the Buddhic consciousness, is born. This process is rightly described as an immaculate conception because it occurred within the individual and is purely spiritual. So let us imagine for a moment the miracle of birth. You can close your eyes. Some of us have never been parents. But just the magnificent miracle of the birth of the human being, from conception to the 9 months of gestation in this unique liquefied medium of the womb of the mother, and the moment of birth into a true, complete, different reality. And every human being goes through that. So when the human being reaches this monadic consciousness, it awakens and it realizes that unity with the oversoul. It is said that the human being becomes an adept. He who is in the physical body and is able to bridge the highest spiritual aspect of his being with his densest and most physical part. And that's what I was mentioning earlier, is this transmutation of our densest nature into our more spiritual nature. And this is a work of daily life. It happens here on earth as we work and have our being within our family life, within our professional lives, within our spiritual lives, but all of that together. So this is what we have been calling, all along, the awakening of the soul, pretty much. Or what some Christian mystics call it, the awakening of the Christ consciousness within is the pure realization and recognition of our own divinity. And the comprehension and realization of this ultimate reality of unity amidst the diversified manifestation is the highest spiritual duty of every human being. So I have been talking big words, saying big concepts. And most of you are familiar with these words, one way or another have heard or remember. So what really is the implication of encountering this knowledge? And it should be quite significant for us. It's of great significance and meaning. Because it implies that we are already walking a certain path to our own divinity. It is not a coincidence that we are exposed to these teachings and we are hearing it again. Let's put it that way. This is not new to any one of you, is it? You might be called it something different. The Christians might resonate with the mystery of the Christ. But Theosophists may resonate with the Logos and the monad and the absolute reality. But it is the exact same thing. So we are all threading this path towards our divinity by an ever-increasing understanding and deepening understanding and awareness of these laws inherent in the universe, by living them and giving them expression in our conscious daily existence. Over and over, I have to stress and emphasize that this is something visible. Even though I started by saying that these are the inner workings of nature, but they become transparent in our doings. So there are some practical means by which we can have a more soulful living that leads to inner peace. There are very simple things that we all do, but perhaps not with the necessary consciousness or intensified consciousness that it requires. Based on this knowledge, there are these means that we have, there are inner means that we have to unfold and balance our own divinity in our everyday life. This is not something that we have to build. That divinity is there. It has to be realized, remembered as often as possible. So these are soul activities that we should engage in our daily life, such as simple as discernment and mindfulness at all levels of our being. Literally, at all levels of our being. Mindfulness is a holistic dimension of our consciousness. It opens the eyes of the soul and purifies our actions. Discernment, on the other hand, allows us to do our best in all life circumstances. Every action should be performed skillfully lovingly, and selflessly. And by right action, I mean right intention, right thought, right feeling, right speech, right living. Detachment. That is a big one for all of us. So as simple as this, don't take others' negative emotions, thoughts, criticisms, and actions personally. Detachment practice in this way builds our soul immune system against those negative mental and emotional entities and energies. Pretty simple, isn't it? We all know that. But do we practice it every day? We get so caught up in otherwise. Another one that is probably something that I have been practicing lately quite often after so many challenges that, for whatever karmic reasons are there in the way, I am grateful regardless. So our life can take most uplifting turns and bring our way wonderful gifts and experiences when we practice genuine gratitude. No matter how hard or heavy the karma may feel upon our shoulders, we should be grateful that it is not worse and that all evil is transitory. That is important. All evil is transitory. Even our worst emotions are subject to law. They are temporary. Our greatest happiness are subject to law, are temporary. Peace, however, can be temporarily, but hopefully everlasting at some point. Perhaps that's the only eternal feeling there is, because it embraces everything with understanding. Gratitude is a change of attitude, an inner way of seeing and feeling that leads to peace and unconditional love. Meditation, of course. I am sure that all of you have a way to inner quiet yourselves, to create that moment of peace and quiet for yourselves. But I will remind you again that that is essential, so keep on doing it. Because it brings us into direct relationship with that divine place of silence within. It is one of the most powerful and essential tools by which our ordinary overstimulated daily consciousness is brought into focus, into a state of stillness, and purifies and opens the soul to perceive truth and the experience of the world of spirit. It is the most sacred time of day to reorient ourselves Godward. It should happen in the morning, and it must happen at night before going to bed. Giving yourself a moment of quiet, not only to be grateful, but to connect as we awake and as we fall asleep. For that is a soul activity, breathing and waking and sleeping. Very important processes of the soul. That is a whole different lecture in itself. But think of those two. How we come and leave the body every day in these small intervals. So at last, I suggest that trusting the law of karma perhaps is the greatest of all things that we can really trust in and have as a foundation on this path of inner peace. And I'm going to quote the wonderful and beautiful words of Annie Besant from this very special book titled The Spiritual Life. And she says, to rest on the law is one of the secrets of peace, to trust it utterly at all times, especially when the gloom descends. No soul that aspires can ever fail to rise. No heart that loves can ever be abandoned. Difficulties exist only that in overcoming them, we may grow strong, and only those who have suffered are able to save. So, the law of karma is, of course, another law of the universe that it is as cosmic as it can be, because the whole universe is bound by this law, but it can be as personal as it can be, because every moment of our being is affected and driven by this law. Karma and dharma, both, are together. So before, I think we have a little time, I would like to leave you with a couple of things for you to think about this law of karma. That again is a broad subject, but something that it will make it for you a little bit more impersonal, yet insightful. So the first key point I would like to point at is that karma is absolutely impersonal, and it is either good nor bad. The result of our actions depend solely on the quality of our intentions. And then the second key point has to do with our experiences. And sometimes we say, I can't handle this. It's too much, too heavy of a burden. And I can only say that experiences will present to us only when our soul is mature enough to learn from them, and not otherwise. The heavier the karma, the greater the strength, wisdom, and responsibility of soul required to lift it. Whether good or bad, painful or pleasurable, these experiences may be for the soul, they are all there to gain wisdom. No matter which one it is, they are there for us to experience it, and at the end of the day, we do our review of the day, and we assimilate these experiences, and in our soul life, we mature it, and we gain the wisdom that is there for us. So this is a way, we students of Theosophy and any aspirant of this higher knowledge should consider our lives if we want to understand these deeper spiritual matters. The moment we turn our thoughts to the workings of the spirit through the lens of this cosmic law of karma, of course, our attitude towards life begins to change, our souls begin to awaken, and these are really pretty much the preliminary steps that we need to take in the spiritual path. Where do we stand, or where do we start if not from there? I wish David was listening to this. I'm about to quote him. Say, I didn't want to mention this on my own, so I'm just going to leave it to somebody else. I'm going to quote somebody, and I want to be the recipient of this. So I'm just going to conclude this sharing with the words of our National Secretary, Derry Bruce. You all know this great man. And he has also written on this third object of the Theosophical Society. And he says, if we are unhappy and frustrated with life, the possession of psychic powers will not bring us the inner peace we so desperately seek for. At best, they provide a temporary diversion. At worst, they can lead to psychological instability and impairment of physical health. Physical health, so important thing. Serious students of Theosophy agree that we must first change our lives before we can safely acquire intimate knowledge of nature occult forces. And this is why it has long been said, live the life if you are to come to the wisdom. Very well put, isn't it? That doesn't mean that these psychic powers are not necessary, but what this means is, from this point of view of evolution, now many of us are aware that Our psychic nature has already been developed in the animal kingdom. So we are not going into any more extraordinary realm. Most of us have psychic powers. That is nothing extraordinary. Really. It's just as if you stick your head underwater and see that there are myriads of creatures beneath the ocean, down there. So the animal kingdom mastered that before we became human. And so it's almost like we are taking a step back in evolution if you are so caught up in that. It's okay to have these sensitivities only if it helps us to expand our view of life, to connect with others, to deepen our understanding and our view of this ultimate reality. But if it becomes an impediment, and if it separates us from one another, we better don't need those, because they become hindrance. One becomes so sensitive that we are incompatible to live in this world of many challenges and great opportunities. And so, I don't know what are your aspirations, but I aspire to deep peace. And some of those things have never brought me peace. When I was little, I was troubled by some challenges of this sort. And I'm grateful that they are there no more and have become more creative capacities of my soul to deal with more mature aspects of my being. And I tell this in all humility, not because I am greater than anybody else. I tell you from life experience that can be a great hindrance and nothing that really made me more closer to any one of my friends, my family or relatives, or people who I did disagree with. And so, I respect any of those practices, but I also respect the steps higher than that. So I would like to end with a few moments of silence, if we can all close our eyes once again. And let us contemplate on the inner meaning of this holy season. This is the month of December, the season when the days grow short and the night grows long. When the darkness grows large and the light grows small. Let us think of this light that is growing small as the outer sunlight of the world. It is in this outer darkness that the inner sunlight must be born in the soul. This is the season of Christmas, when we celebrate the birth of the light of the universe being born inside the human heart. And that is why the mystery of Christmas was placed in the darkest time of the year. So the allegory of the light of the Spirit being born in the soul corresponds to the great birth in Bethlehem that happened some 2,000 years ago. And this is the case for every child being born. With every birth, again and again, the soul of the universe becomes one with the human heart. Blessed be the Holy Trinity, the undivided unity, eternal, immortal, invisible, to whom be honor and glory, forever and ever. Amen. And with this, I wish you the peace of the seasons, of this very special season and very sacred celebrations. Thank you.
I was just wondering, what does the roses mean? Do the rose themselves represent something, or are you just trying to show the three? There's three.
I'm glad you are asking those questions. Well, do you really want to know the story of the roses?
Well, I just think it's weird because my grandma always told me, like, the reason why we smell roses when people die or something in our family. And my middle name was Rose. It was weird, but my sister didn't get it. And she says, like, only the women that get it, and it gets passed from the grandma. So I saw the roses and I'm like, oh, okay, what is that?
Well, of course, it's a symbol of the Divine Trinity, absolutely. But it's also the symbol of the awakening of the soul. You know, a rose is a perennial plant. And I'm not sure how many of you have studied botany as much as I do, but the calyx of a rose is a 5-pointed star. And so whatever grows above that, is a great mystery. So the story of these roses is that I'm going to bring them to my school tomorrow because I have an event. So I bought them tonight and I say, well, let me just bring them to the lecture. They're so beautiful. So I want to share with all of you. So that's how they ended up at the table. Happened to be 3. And so nothing mystical about it, but yes, they do have a symbolism. And that is that. You know, from the Rosicrucian tradition, you want to research a little bit into it. There is a whole mystery about the rose and the cross and the Christ. So search on it. Yeah, it's pretty beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I haven't done much study about the soul and the monad and how they interplay. But my question is, and maybe we can answer, maybe we can't, I don't know. But is the monad something that we all share in this room together, and then there's a soul that we all reflect from that as individuals, or does each person or personality within this room have its own soul, which is connected to its own monad, or are we all under one?
You are answering your own question. Yes, as I said in the lecture, it's a little bit of a mystery, but as I said, the soul is a reflection of that monad. And as I said, there are monads everywhere. There are myriads of monads in the universe, which are sparks of the universal monad, or cosmic, if you will, because it's beyond the universe. We're talking about cosmos with a K, not with a C. From the occult perspective, that is what embraces all. No, not this manifested cosmos, but the unmanifested as well. And so this monad is a cosmic principle. And in the process of manifestation, through this fabric of Maya, it appears as multiplied. You know, there are many of these sparks, and each one of these sparks is a center of consciousness and has the potential to become a universe in itself. And that has this obligatory pilgrimage to become, everything in the universe has to become men. Not men, these two-legged people that we have here, but mind. It wants to become mind, realize itself, and spiritualize itself beyond that. So we are in the middle point of this descending arc of evolution, and then we are going up to the ascending arc of evolution. So we have hit the rock bottom. We are going up now. And the wonderfulness of being human. And so, yes, we all share an individual soul. So we all have an individual soul, but yet that soul is connected with the oversoul of humanity, which we all share, which is kind of paradoxical because we were talking about that the animal kingdoms, the plants and the rocks, minerals have these group souls, but human beings also have group souls. We talk about the souls of countries, the souls of, a particular community. Sometimes in our Dharma study group, we acknowledge the Deva of our group, right? That we are building together as one. So with our thoughts and our intentions, you are building a living force there that is alive. And organizations and businesses and everything has that living entity. Our homes have a soul quality to it. But always remember that that is a projection of those human beings who animate those thoughts. It's not just is there. Yeah, there are many beings, that inhabit the astral world and spiritual world, but we are talking what we can see here, you and I. This is very practical, This is what we can tangibly create. And so, yes, I don't know if that answers your question, but it is a great play, this great illusory reality. So many divisions, so many multiplicities of things, and at the very end, everything is rooted in the same ultimate reality of the oneness of life, which is pretty much the essence of Theosophy. If we lose connection with that, anything that you study, you can be the most theoretical Theosophist and recite the secret doctrine from cover to cover, but if you lose that essence of oneness, you lost everything. No matter what is that you know, pretty much there's no value to anything else. So
I don't know if this is exactly tied into what you just spoke about, but you talked about school. Mm. And I heard the term Waldorf, and that's a certain philosophy. Mm. Are you connected to that?
Yeah.
And how do you take this information and entwine that in what you do?
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for asking that. That's pretty much, my other life. Well, that's really the heart of Waldorf education. What is it that makes it different from public education? We see the human beings as souls, as a human being that has come from somewhere, pre-earthly existence, that bring capacities and potentials, and that are evolving, and that we are affecting their destiny. And so we educate them physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And I have to connect with them at the soul level, otherwise I cannot do my work. So the soul life of a Waldorf school is rooted in the reality of the Christ. So we work from our Christ principle. And everything that we do in His name. Not many people, work as, inspired, but it was set forth from that esoteric tradition. And many of us do study anthroposophy and try to live it in our daily life. And through that filter or lens, we see our children as evolving souls. Every day we see them anew. New potentials are revealing to us. We have this opportunity to see the soul incarnate in their little bodies through their walking, speaking, their thinking, their feeling. It's amazing. Their falling of their teeth, their imagination, the way they inspire us, and the way they are inspired. So it is from a soul life that we work for, or from. Mm-hmm.